The Mexican government cannot maintain order or assure the safety of its own citizens, so how can we expect it to protect Americans who live and work there from the violence of drug gangs, even when the employer of those Americans is the United States government? If recreational drugs were decriminalized, the Mexican drug gangs would go out of business overnight. Since we own our own bodies, why can't we put whatever we want into ourselves, so long as we don't harm anybody else as a result of doing that? Didn't we learn this hard lesson during the disaster of Prohibition? Joining me now is Paul Armentano, Deputy Director of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws and co-author of the book, Marijuana is Safer. Paul, welcome back to Freedom Watch.
It's great to be here.
You know, I like to do these segments with you and with others who remind us of the futility of the drug war from time to time. But I read, I think just this morning, about the execution of two embassy workers American embassy workers at a border town in Mexico. And the American government, in response to this, says, don't go to the border towns in Mexico. Keep doing the same thing over and over again and somehow expect that the problem will go away. Is there a realistic hope that the American government would learn that the violence of the drug lords will only go away when we put them out of business by letting people do what they want to do to and with their own bodies in the privacy of their own homes here in the U.S.?
It's tragic. And we are seeing an unprecedented wave of violence on the U.S.-Mexican border. I mean, we're talking about nearly 20,000 related murders since 2006, all over this failed drug war, which in many ways is simply a war on marijuana, because that is the primary source of these Mexican cartels' income. Even the U.S. federal government admits that these Mexican drug gangs make more than 60% of their overall profits on the sale and distribution of marijuana, not on other illicit activities. And it is the U.S. market, it is the U.S. consumption of marijuana, which is higher per capita than anywhere else in the world, that is driving that market.
All right, Paul, what would happen, take us through this, what would happen if the federal government decriminalized marijuana, meaning you could buy it at some particular location, you could use it in your home. You can't drive a car when you're under the influence any more than you can when you're under the influence of alcohol, but suddenly it becomes lawful. Take us through what would happen to the drug gangs and the violence in the Mexico-U.S. border.
Look, if we want to once and for all reduce this wave of violence, then we need to remove the cartel's primary source of income, and that's marijuana. We've tried for decades to reduce demand in this country, and that hasn't worked. The United States is still the primary destination for Mexican-grown marijuana, and it's a $113 billion market in this country. 1 out of 10 Americans use marijuana now, despite the fact that it is illegal to do so. It's time we take the production and distribution of marijuana out of the hands of these violent criminal enterprises and into the hands of licensed businesses. And the way we do that is through legalization and regulation. These cartels aren't bootlegging booze across the border. They're not bootlegging tobacco across the border. They're bootlegging marijuana, and that's because Americans want it, and it's because they can't get it legally or in a regulated manner in this country. So the only source left for the consumer are these illegal channels, and that's what's spawning the violence. You want to get rid of the violence. You need to regulate this product the way we regulate other drugs in this country. Regulation means control. Prohibition is the absence of control.
I'm not going to debate with you on regulation and taxation. That's another issue which I am generally against the government getting involved with. But I'm certainly 100% with you in favor of allowing people to put into their bodies whatever they want as long as it doesn't harm another human being. I understand you're in New York today, Paul, in order to debut a new advertisement, a new television ad. You're rolling out a new ad for Normal. Tell us about the new ad.
true. Normal is debuting today a new 15-second ad on the CBS Superscreen, which is a digital billboard in downtown Times Square on 42nd Street. And the crux of this ad is just what we're talking about right now. If we want to end this violence, if we want to bring legitimacy to the marijuana market, then it's time to legalize marijuana. And we argue that by doing so, by bringing this $113 billion underground economy above ground, we will have safer streets, we will raise revenue, and as I mentioned earlier, we will bring controls to this anarchic environment that we have now that's not helping anyone.
Does the
not the consumer and not the taxpayers.
Paul, has the American government responded at all, for example, to former Mexican President Vicente Fox, who says it's time to legalize it, to the United States, excuse me, to the Mexican ambassador to the United States who says it's time to legalize it? Is there any reconsideration going on in the government? Or are we're just doing the same thing over and over and over again, notwithstanding your good efforts to point out the futility of the nation's drug wars?
I'm really glad you bring that up. You are correct. Vicente Fox has recently come out and said we need to legalize marijuana if we're ever going to really address this problem, as has Mexico's ambassador to the United States. Unfortunately, it does not appear that anyone in this administration is getting the message. And that's not to imply anyone in the previous administrations got the message either. Look, the current director of the DEA said quite recently, and I quote, that the violence we are seeing on the border is a signpost of success. In her mind, as the violence and the killings are growing on the U.S.-Mexican border, people within our own government and the DEA are seeing that as a sign that somehow we are winning this battle. That is how backwards the thinking is now in Washington.
That shows the importance of the advertisement campaign that you're running. The billboard that you talk about is about 2 blocks from here. And when we finish Freedom Watch today, I'm going to go over there and look at it as you roll it out. Paul Armentano, it's a pleasure as always. Thanks for joining us on Freedom Watch.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.